All right. My name is Joanne Roll. I'm the Dean of the School of Business at Medgar Evers College. It is indeed my pleasure to present my keynote presentation, Visions of a Better Normal for Humanity. And let's get started because I have lots of materials and I want to put myself on on a timer to make sure that I am on time. The agenda is our challenge, worldwide income inequality, our work, trends in the future. We will look at five corporate executives, Cigna, Deloitte, IBM, Mayo Clinic, and Adico as trends in the future of work. Then we'll look at overview of our new publication that just launched today, Future of Work and Entrepreneurship for the Underserved. It is a handbook. Hope for the future of work and entrepreneurship and practical implications and conclusions. And then I will give you our charge. Many of us educators will appreciate the energy in this particular cartoon. It says, for a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. We have students that come to us with diversity of skill sets, diversity of resources, and they are expected to be marketable in the same marketplace that others who have different skills and different abilities and different resources have. And so that sets up what I call the equity jungle, how to navigate the equity jungle. Our challenge is worldwide income inequity. The top 10% in national income earners across the globe are earning the majority of the income. You can see the darker areas in Latin America, in Africa, and in other places where 10% of the population are driving anywhere between 50 to 70% of the income. What I say about this is the future of work and entrepreneurship for the underserved is a struggle for humanity. It is not a new struggle. It is one we've been working with for a long time. And an additional challenge for us here in the US is racial income inequality. We find that education, income, labor, many things have had innovations. But the truth and the fact of the matter, when we look at the data, since the civil rights movement, we have had a bigger gap in income between Black and white incomes. So when we as educators are working with our students in the minority market, in the developing countries, we have a special charge and a special challenge. What is our work? And this is quoted from Work Disrupted by Jeff Schwartz. He's a partner or a lead in the future of work practice at Deloitte. As leaders, we need to allow ourselves to experiment, try things out, and make adjustments. Leaders navigating the future of work will find themselves experiencing the uncomfortable stages of the creative process. They may also be surprised by what they discover is possible. And this is indeed has been some of our experience. But first, let's just define a corporate experience in what the future of work looks like in the future and how will we come to this place. Because I have several clips, I will cut him off, but I will summarize what John Marabito at Cigna says.
Having discussed education, let's talk about the workforce of the future. What does that look like from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, the key word, and I don't have the corner on this knowledge because I mean, we're all talking about it in my HR world. But I mean, flexibility is what it's likely to be all about. I think that the challenge becomes how we really optimize employees to be at their best, how we engage them in how they can be at their best and respect what they want to do, and then find a way that find the intersection of what works for us as a company and what works for them as an employee. And so you may have a lot of situations going forward where the majority of a non-manufacturing workforce, for example, could be a hybrid workforce.
Okay, so what he said in that particular piece was that we will never go back to what we knew before, where massive amount of real estate and employees and employees are in campuses of buildings. What he's predicting is that a small and possibly executive group will be in the spaces working together. Then a larger group will be working from home and alternative spaces, but utilizing all of the technology we have to do our work together. He goes on to further say that there still is a place for large gatherings so that we could decrease some of the isolation and feel the oneness that we have felt before. And so now we're going to go to Deloitte and talk about the future of work from the Work Disrupted book that Jeff just produced earlier this year. But the one thing I want you to note that he says is that in the future, everyone should expect to be working with machines. And so he'll tell you a little bit about that. And it's not just him. That has been a group of authors, including some of the ones from MIT.
I spent the weekend reading your book, Work Disrupted. It's a delightful read, and I commend it to all listeners. So before we get into the content of the book, tell us what inspired you to write it.
Well, first, I'm delighted that you read it and are enjoying it. I think it's a fun book. I've been doing research on the future of work at Deloitte probably for about 8 years. I think I wrote the first article where I would draw a line between leading our talent practice and starting to think about the future of work in 2013. And it was an article that we published in the middle of the year on the open talent economy. And we were looking at different employment models. Now, today, this is totally obvious. We talk about full-time workers, gig workers, freelance workers, contract workers, crowd workers, ghost workers. It was not totally obvious in 2013. And when we started talking about particularly gig workers and the role of microtasks, it was very new. And a couple of years later, we wrote a piece literally titled, Harpreet, Machines as Talent. So this was sort of our recognizing that machines were not just tools. This builds on Tom Malone's research at MIT, but that technology was also becoming part of the workforce, the notion of a digital full-time equivalent. And then in 2016, we actually formally established the future of work practice at Deloitte, global aid in the US. And what I recognized was that many of the ideas that we were looking at, whether it was employment models or whether it was how people and technology are working together, or whether it was how we think about the workplace, we were moving between what I was describing and I describe in the book as 21st century models and 20th century models. And in much of the work we were doing with our clients and many of the conversations we were having, we found that one of the challenges that we were dealing with is that we would talk about accessing talent across talent boundaries, and people would talk to us about the recruitment function. And the recruitment function, not to be critical of it, the recruitment function is designed to recruit a specific type of talent for a specific type of job with a specific type of employee relationship, a full-time contract with a company. So increasingly, the models that we were using were not helpful to solving the problems, right? And that's what led me to write the book, which is, what are the 21st century mindsets and models that we can develop that will help us navigate work and careers versus using 20th century models. It's not about throwing everything out. Obviously, a lot of stuff we're going to pull forward, but really the book is structured around what are these new mental models around workforces, and workplaces.
Okay, so what we understand from Jeff is that the models of old are not going to work for us as we go forward with the innovation and the transformation of technology driving us to need new models. But let's look at the CEO of Deloitte, and he can share with you, and this is what really impressed me, about empowering communities where Deloitte employees work, going from the bottom up to have engagement and solving some of the real world problems and looking specifically at what the issue is and developing solutions for specific issues in specific regions. Let's listen to it now.
Puneet, let's talk about World Class, the social impact initiative where you seek to empower 50 million people with education and skills by 2030 in the communities in which you are engaged. Can you tell us more about this initiative and what kind of skills you are targeting?
Well, Harpreet, I think when we started work on this a couple of years ago, we thought to ourselves, first off, we're a purpose-driven organization. We're committed to making an impact for our clients, for our people, from the communities that we live and work. And as an organization, we give back into the communities 3% of our distributable earnings. And that is important, but the most valuable asset that we have is the 300,000 professionals that call Deloitte home. So when we looked across the globe, we found that there were a large number of individuals that were being left behind in this fourth industrial revolution. And it varied by geography. And so let me give you an example. So the overall goal that we came up with was 50 million. We wanted it to be a stretch goal so that we could motivate ourselves to achieve something big. 10 million of that 50 million is a commitment in India. In India, 175 million women and girls are not educated. And because they're not educated, they will not have access to a rapidly developing economy. So our commitment in India is to impact 10 million women and girls through education. In China, the issue is the left behind children. As China has industrialized and moved to the cities, these children have been left behind. So our commitment in China is to impact positively these children that have been left behind. In Papua New Guinea, the commitment is for seaweed farmers and educating them on the value that they are creating so they don't get exploited in the value chain. So now the beauty of this is that in every community, Deloitte professionals can volunteer to impact their community in a positive way under the umbrella of World Class and under the umbrella of uplifting individuals through education.
And what is the modality of this engagement? Are the Deloitte professionals engaging with schools? Are they doing other work? How do they get involved?
Excellent question. So let's take India again. There are the commitment in India now involves two NGOs, Pratham and Katha, that are working in this sector in India. And Deloitte professionals work with them to impact the women and girls that Pratham and Katha are organizing to give them education, skills, and capabilities so that they can participate in the Indian economy. We're going to expand that. In India, we've had tremendous success, and I think we're going to go from 10 million to 30 million in India alone. And so our overall target will increase, but we're going to try and expand it from just education to skills, and then hopefully marry them up with a job. And the thinking, Harpreet, is that if you impact the women and girls, give them education, it certainly impacts them personally, but it impacts their families. And so there is a real multiplier effect to what we're trying to get done. And then the benefit to Deloitte is that you get engagement from our people. You leverage the most valuable asset that Deloitte has, which is our people, and of course, the money that we put in.
So there you have another trend that we hope is replicated across other corporations, where you invest in the individuals who are in your company and have them also invest and engage in their communities and lifting the boat up where everyone lives. So now we saw a trend in Deloitte. Let's look at IBM. The pace of technology and innovation is changing very quickly. How is IBM and other tech companies going to keep their workforce learned and engaged? Let's see.
Let's talk about upskilling and reskilling. As we know, a very large percent of our population is going to need to be retrained. So how are you tackling that internally? How are you helping IBMers reskill themselves or upskill themselves in the context of AI automation that's in front of us?
Yes, so I'll answer it again, thinking about this on two levels. In technology in particular, the half-life of skills is decreasing. No longer can you get a certification or a degree or a set of skills, and that will last you an entire career. The technology is just moving too fast. And so one of the things that all companies need to do, whether you're in technology or not, is that you need to build as a piece of your culture this concept of continuous learning. It needs to be how your company operates. If you think about it, a lot of the work around growth mindset is fundamentally on that level. That's the way we evolve and work and continue to stay contemporary as humans. But it's even more important for companies to make sure that they set that expectation in their culture so that employees know what's expected of them. But then it's also incumbent upon you as an employer to make sure that you're giving them opportunities to do that. And we've done that a couple different ways. So if you think about, well, how do you plumb continuous learning? How do you make it real in an organization? One of the things that we did was we created an online digital platform. I like to think of it as Netflix for learning. It's called Your Learning. It is AI enabled. It will surface recommendations to you based on your job profile, but it will also show you curated learning roadmaps. So if I said I wanted to be a Java programmer, it would actually curate the entire path and might say to me, Nicole, it will take you 250 hours to have that happen. For you, if you said I wanted to be a Java programmer, it might curate a different set of learning. And it might say, Dr. Singh, it will take you 3 hours. But that type of personalization and customization is exactly what organizations need so that employees can feel empowered and that you're not wasting time and energy and resources so that you're sitting through 250 hours when you don't need 247 of it.
So the important piece there is no longer are we going to say one size fits all. You both go into the same class where it only might take you 10 hours to get the material and it takes someone else 100 hours, but you both have to sit there through 100 hours. So it's this flexibility that was first mentioned in the Signet piece, flexibility in the learning process, flexibility in the work, flexibility in the employer and the employees together, coming together to make it work. Let's look at the health sector. You know, many sectors in terms of the retail sector, the tourist sector have taken a hit in COVID, but one sector that has really had a boom has been the health sector. Let's listen to some of the trends in the health sector.
Let's come back to workforce. You've discussed healthcare and how the clinical aspects are often emphasized when people think about careers. If you were to look at from a macro perspective, the trends, what kind of trends are you seeing emerging from a workforce perspective?
Well, I mean, the trend you're seeing, at least in healthcare, it will follow, I call it an employer's choice. So you are getting a lot more kind of entrance into people or organizations that want to help people's health. It could be Amazon, it could be Google. It could be coming from our insurance organizations. It could come from the healthcare services. So you are getting a lot of invention that is in the end trying to figure out how to help people. Now, here's what we also, a lot of different brilliant ideas, things that we haven't thought about that are shifting our paradigms about how care is given. How do you work through preventive care? How do you early indicate that someone's going to have the likely of having a heart attack without having any other signs except for certain algorithms, et cetera, right? So you've got, first of all, that. At the same time, you've got the kind of the desire for the consumer to do a lot more things at home. They want to do it at home. They don't want to be inconvenienced. We have, in some regards, commoditized certain elements of healthcare. So I bring those two things together to say, first of all, I think the trend of healthcare is you're going to get a very much of a baseline. It's going to be commoditized. It'll be things that you get as a matter of routine. It's things that are going to be super convenient. You're going to go to Costco, get your kit. You're going to go to Walgreens and actually get your test, whatever it is, or you're going to stay at home and something's going to happen to you. That's going to be there. There is going to be an emerging level of healthcare, and this is where Mayo Clinic's always going to be, which is at that pinnacle of things that are emerging, subspecialty things that you'll just never diagnose without really very good problem solvers who've seen it many times, be able to get that diagnosis that you otherwise wouldn't get. It's going to come not only because human touch and actually experience, but it's come through platform and data, and all those things will come together. So it's going to be quite bifurcated. The true kind of high level data scientists, physicians, researchers, clinicians, business people that are thinking about this in a very different way. And then I'd say the rest is more about an operational excellence element of the delivery of healthcare kind of day in and day out. People will live longer. People will actually get better care. They'll have better lives. And I think it's playing within those kind of two parts. You got to figure out where you are. You've got to excel at that. That will mean huge things for the workforce, because it may not be as much as the mid-level providers, but rather at the top of the game or more in more of a commodity-ish type kind of delivery.
Okay, so she talked about how the healthcare industry is going to change for the employee and employers, but she also indicated a little bit for the entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs who were in the middle need to understand that what is going to happen in the future is we're going to have the high end, and then we're going to have the commodity end, which is lower prices, which is more difficult to operate in. So those are the two sectors she sees that are coming in healthcare. But let's look at what it's going to take to actually reduce inequality here in the US and other developed countries.
The welfare model would certainly make sense in the European context because you have the frameworks and the policies in place. How do you see that kind of a model? It's very challenging to do something like that in the US, right? So what is your perspective? How does the US provide that safeguards and security to the gig workers?
It is clear that according to the country and let's say the type of economy you have, is it more liberal or is it more structured? You will have a different attitude. I think Europe has a different attitude towards work than some other countries have. So that's point one. But second, I think that on the long run, if you want to reduce inequality, especially, you need to put in place the proper framework, because also these platform workers, and they can be let's say highly educated, at some point of time, they need to reskill and upskill themselves, because today you are losing 40% of your skills every 3 years. And so if you don't have a framework allowing you individually or collectively to upskill and reskill yourself, you will lose your employability, the companies will lose the competitiveness, and the countries will also lose the competitiveness. So even for a country like the US, I think it is important to not only to reflect, but to act on that type of new economy developing. And we see it has been the case with the AB5 in California, but then starting from California, we have seen that in all the states of the US. So I think this has to move to that, this welfare state is organized, and that there is no tension, social tension at the end, because you have too high inequality between the type of the contract, the labor contract you are providing.
So what was key here is no matter what, where you are, who you are, 40% or more of your skill set is going to be lost in 3 years because technology, innovation, and the world of work is moving that fast. What he said was in Europe and some other countries, there's a framework such that workers can retool themselves. And you heard that IBM within its own framework is finding a way and a path to retool those who are in IBM. But in the general broader government, implement, we do not have in the US a way to retool and upskill our workers systemically. It is a structural problem or challenge from our previous video. What I want to say is that we have new voices coming in the future of work. I'm very proud to say that the book released today, a handbook on the future of work, of entrepreneurship, and for the underserved. The drive to curate this body of work is to find authentic voices, narrative, and trajectories from practitioners and academics for the futures they envision for the underserved, and not necessarily that was envisioned by them. In the handbook, you will find many topics to include technology and innovation, diverse and inclusive labor markets, small business development, and education and training. They also explore challenges, opportunities, risks, and aspirations that characterize the future of work and entrepreneurship in underserved ecosystems. And I want to share with you one specific one that is of Latin America. It is the lead chapter in the book, and we are calling it, or I'm calling it at least, Hope for the Future of Work and Entrepreneurship. It starts with the community and a shared vision. The researchers went in and they just didn't tell the community what to do. In many cases, there were this was drug economies. And it was the women in those economies that said, we are willing to take less income if we could save our men. Many of the men who were sons, husbands, and fathers were dying, and the women were left with the children to raise them. And so what they said was, we will take less money, but we want to save our families. So they developed a shared vision around saving the community. And they had an ecosystem of many entrepreneurial ventures, which they had developed business cases for that were public and private. Some developed in tourism, waste management, every area of the ecosystem where the city needed work and development, they did it there. And these researchers didn't go in for 1 or 2 years or did 1 or 2 papers. They have dedicated 25 years of their life and their work, and they have seen some progress. And we are hoping that this could be replicated, that policymakers will no longer just look at what they see through their prisms, but they will give our communities the opportunity to co-create with them. And that is the experience. And we're very pleased that this is the first chapter in the book. So practical implications and conclusions. We propose that unity in community and capacity building is vital to create shared prosperity, such as the one in the previous example. In our handbook, we share diverse, authentic perspectives on what the future of work and entrepreneurship will evolve into in the new normal. This is me personally. It is my hope that trends in the future of work and intentional innovation, thought leadership, bottom up, will yield new outcomes for the underserved, such that we achieve a better normal for humanity. We don't want to go back to the normal where most of the world is poor and 10% of the world is driving all the income, because we don't believe that is sustainable. We believe a more just, a most socially just society is we learn how to share the prosperity. And this is our charge in the end. We indeed have one. Indeed, our communities can serve as laboratories for innovation. We should not be afraid to try something new, where we can develop and test reskilling programs such as the one that IBM said, but at a local and a more community level, at a level where more of the people outside of the large corporations can share. Explore the creation of transition nets and reset local agendas as a precursor to resetting national policies and programs that have not worked for us in the past. With all the programs that we have had in the past, we yet have the poor with us. And since COVID, the poor is growing. So hopefully some of these trends from the corporate side, from the venues and the views and the lens of the community will lead to a better normal in the future. I thank you, and I will now take questions.